What happens when an entire nation is utterly torn? When its people are caught between empty promises and the undeniable truth? On Mount Carmel, one fearless prophet stepped onto a stage set for a cosmic showdown. It was Elijah versus 450 prophets of Baal, a battle that would decide the very fate of Israel, and challenge us even today to choose whom we will truly follow. A nation gasps for rain, its king sulks in self-pity, and one man, Elijah, just walked into the palace and said, "Enough." Within 24 hours, 450 professional prophets would be out of work because fire was about to fall, and only one altar would still be standing. This wasn't just a story about ancient history. It was a powerful, raw, and utterly human drama that echoes in our lives right now. For 3.5 grueling years, Israel had heard nothing from heaven. Not a drop of dew, not a whisper of rain, just an oppressive, baking silence. The land was parched, the crops withered, and the people were desperate. Why? Because under the corrupt leadership of King Ahab and his notorious Phoenician queen, Jezebel, Israel had plunged headfirst into a spiritual crisis. Jezebel, a devout worshipper of Baal and Asherah, had aggressively promoted these false gods throughout the kingdom, setting up altars and maintaining hundreds of prophets and priests. Baal, a Canaanite storm god, was supposed to bring fertility and rain. Yet here they were. The ground cracked like old pottery, a brutal testament to Baal's utter impotence. The drought wasn't just an ecological disaster. It was a divine judgment, a consequence of their widespread spiritual unfaithfulness. King Ahab, in a classic move of misplaced blame, pointed fingers at Elijah for the drought. But Elijah, with unwavering clarity, knew better. He understood that the drought was merely a symptom. The real disease was a nation of divided hearts. People would chant to Baal at sunrise, hoping for a blessing, then maybe whisper Yahweh's name at sunset, just in case. They were trying to hedge their bets, desperately hoping one of them would come through. This spiritual fence-sitting, this double-minded noise was tearing the nation apart. Elijah's question cut through the wavering like a sharp blade. How long will you waver between two opinions? He wasn't asking for a debate, he was demanding a decision. Translation: pick a side, Israel. Because wishful thinking and spiritual apathy never ended a famine, and they certainly won't save a soul. This wasn't just about theology, it was about survival, about identity, about who they truly believed controlled the skies and their very destiny. Elijah wasn't one for bureaucratic processes. No need for a committee, a focus group, or even security detail. His message to Ahab was simple, direct, and utterly audacious. Summon the prophets of Baal, every last one of them, along with the prophets of Asherah, and meet me on Mount Carmel. Can you picture it? A majestic ridge overlooking the vast Jezreel Valley, the wind whipping dust into eyes already red and irritated from 3 years of drought. The air crackled with anticipation, a mixture of fear, skepticism, and maybe, just maybe, a sliver of hope. On one side, you had 450, some accounts say 850, prophets of Baal and Asherah, arrayed in their color-fringed robes, symbols in hand, looking every bit the part of confident religious leaders. They were convinced their storm god would show up, that their rituals held power. This was their home turf, their moment to shine, to reassert their dominance. And on the other side, one man, just one. Elijah, in a simple traveling cloak, probably hadn't shaved since the last rainfall, standing alone against the might of the state-sponsored religious machine. It was a stark, almost comical contrast if the stakes weren't so incredibly high. Israel's citizens, drawn by the sheer spectacle and the desperate hope for an answer, filled the slopes of Carmel like concert-goers. But this wasn't entertainment. It was an existential crisis unfolding before their very eyes. The headline act, the one who would actually answer, was still unknown. Elijah laid out the rules, simple and brutal in their clarity. 2 altars, 2 bulls, 1 request, fire from the sky. Whoever answered with fire, that one was God indeed. No room for ambiguity. This wasn't a theological debate, it was a divine demonstration. The tension must have been unbearable, a silent collective holding of breath as the stage was set for the ultimate showdown. Morning broke, and the show began. Baal's team, brimming with confidence, took the stage first. They went through their elaborate rituals. They built their altar, butchered their bull, and then, with fervent desperation, they began. Chants rose into the hot, silent air. Tambourines rattled a frantic rhythm, and the prophets leaped and danced around their altar, calling out to Baal. "O Baal, answer us! they cried over and over. But the sky remained stubbornly, mockingly silent. By lunchtime, their fervor escalated into frenzy. They began cutting themselves with knives and lances, a common practice in Baal worship, believing that Baal loved blood, that such extreme devotion would compel him to respond. The ground around their altar grew slick with their own blood as they screamed themselves hoarse. And there, watching it all, was Elijah. He stood like a man waiting for a bus that isn't coming, observing their increasingly desperate, utterly futile efforts. Every so often he'd toss out a zinger, his voice cutting through their frenzied cries, laced with a dry, almost cruel wit. "Shout louder," he'd taunt. "Maybe he's meditating, or maybe he's on the toilet. Perhaps he's asleep and needs to be awakened." It was a brutal public mockery, designed to expose the utter impotence of their God and the absurdity of their worship. The prophets screamed until their voices cracked, until the sun began its slow descent. Nothing but heat waves danced on the horizon. No fire, no rain, no response. Hours crawled by. The crowd, initially hopeful, shifted from curious to embarrassed, then to an uneasy silence. They were witnessing firsthand the exhausting, futile nature of idolatry. This was Elijah's point exactly. False gods demand everything, your energy, your blood, your sanity, and deliver absolutely nothing. Idolatry, he wanted them to see, isn't just misguided, it's utterly useless. It drains you, leaves you empty, and fails spectacularly when you need it most. The long afternoon of Baal was a masterclass in divine silence and human futility. The sun was setting. The Baal prophets were utterly defeated, their voices hoarse, their bodies bleeding, their God conspicuously absent. Then Elijah stepped forward. "Come here," he commanded the weary, disillusioned crowd. The atmosphere shifted. He didn't scream or dance. He simply went about his work calmly, deliberately. First, he rebuilt the broken-down altar of Yahweh, which had likely fallen into disrepair during the years of Baal worship. He used 12 stones, a powerful visual aid, one for every tribe of Israel. It was a symbolic act, a quiet declaration that unity, a return to their true identity as one nation under Yahweh, truly mattered. He then dug a trench around the altar, arranged the wood, and placed the bull upon it. And then he gave what must have been the most ridiculous, counterintuitive command in religious history. Pour water on it. Lots of water. Not just a little splash. 4 large jars of water, poured not once, but 3 times. 12 barrels of precious water, in the middle of a devastating drought, soaking the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, until the trench was filled like a moat. This wasn't just dramatic. It was brilliant. It removed any shadow of doubt, any possibility of trickery or hidden flames. At this point, even the most cynical skeptics in the crowd must have been utterly curious, leaning forward, wondering what in the world this man was doing. You could almost hear the entire Jezreel Valley hold its breath. Then Elijah prayed. Not a long, frenzied incantation, not a desperate plea filled with repetition or bribes. His prayer was short, perhaps 30 seconds, utterly profound in its simplicity and trust. "Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again." Simple trust, no fanfare, no theatrics, just a direct, heartfelt appeal to the living God. It was a stark contrast to the exhausting, bloody rituals of Baal, a powerful demonstration that true worship isn't about human effort or manipulation, but about humble faith and dependence. And then it happened. Not a flicker, not a spark, but a sudden, roaring, consuming fire. Whoosh! Fire tore down from the heavens. Not just a fire, but a supernatural blaze that devoured everything in its path. Wood, stone, dust, and even the 12 barrels of water in the trench. Everything was vaporized in an instant. It wasn't just a spectacle, it was a divine exclamation mark, a thunderous declaration that Yahweh was real, powerful, and utterly sovereign. It consumed not just the sacrifice, but also the pride, the doubt, the years of wavering that had plagued Israel. The crowd, witnessing this undeniable, terrifying display of power, hit the dirt. They fell prostrate, overcome with awe and terror, their collective voice rising in a mighty roar. "The Lord, He is God! The Lord, He is God!" The choice had been made decisively, undeniably. Elijah, his eyes blazing like the sky moments earlier, didn't waste a second. Seize the prophets of Baal. Don't let a single one escape. Justice, swift and undeniable, rolled down the slopes of Carmel like a flash flood. The execution of the false prophets, though jarring to modern sensibilities, was a direct fulfillment of the law of Moses, which prescribed death for those who led Israel into idolatry. It was a symbolic purging, a violent but necessary act to cleanse the land of the spiritual cancer that had nearly destroyed it. Later, the prophet climbed to the peak of Carmel, bowed low in prayer, and sent his servant to scan the sea. 6 times the servant returned, reporting nothing. But on the 7th look, a tiny cloud, no bigger than a man's hand, appeared on the horizon. That was all Elijah needed. He sent word to Ahab, "Hitch up your chariot and go down before the rain stops you." And then, in an act of supernatural strength, Elijah outran Ahab's chariot all the way to Jezreel, propelled by the power of God, as raindrops began to slap the dust, signaling the end of the devastating drought. The drought was dead. The false gods were discredited. Israel had chosen, at least for today. God had not only shown up, He had restored. This isn't just an ancient story confined to dusty scrolls. It's a living, breathing narrative that speaks directly to our world, right now. Idols always promise what they can't deliver. They whisper sweet nothings of prosperity without covenant, identity without obedience, and rain without repentance. They promise fulfillment but leave you empty, exhausted, and ultimately disappointed. The Carmel moment forces the same decision into our modern feeds, our busy lives, our distracted minds. Will we trust the visible trend, the loudest influencer, the fleeting promise of instant gratification? Or will we trust the invisible maker, the one who truly controls the skies and the depths of our hearts? Elijah's courage wasn't swagger or bravado. It was cultivated through years of prayer, quiet obedience, and a radical, unwavering faith in God. When culture shouts louder, when the pressures of fitting in become overwhelming, cutting ourselves to impress it leaves us just as hoarse and empty as the prophets of Baal. We exhaust ourselves chasing after things that can never truly satisfy. God's fire, by contrast, consumes the excess, the distractions, the false fronts, and leaves worship in its purest, most authentic form. It burns away the dross and refines what is true. The story ends not with condemnation, but with profound restoration. The fire was followed by the rain. The judgment led to blessing. Fields were revived, hope was rekindled, and a nation was given another chance. God's desire is never ultimately destruction. It is always restoration for those who turn back to Him. This narrative is a timeless call to choose wholeheartedly whom we will serve, God or the myriad idols that try to take His place in our hearts today. It challenges us to reflect on what we truly worship, what we truly rely on, what we give our ultimate allegiance to. Elijah's lone stand for God amid widespread apostasy is an incredible challenge for us today. It reminds us that faithfulness isn't always popular, but it is always powerful. True worship is about faith in the living God who answers prayer, controls nature, and cares deeply for His people, not empty rituals or powerless idols. So choose today whom you will serve. Because wavering, fence-sitting, and spiritual apathy cost more than we think. They cost us our peace, our purpose, and ultimately our connection to the one who truly sustains us. If this powerful story stirred something deep within you, hit that like button, drop a comment telling us which idol you think is loudest in our world right now, and subscribe for more raw, unfiltered Bible stories that refuse to stay in the past. One mountain, one prophet, one prayer, and a nation remembered whose voice truly controls the skies. May we remember too, long after the last cloud passes overhead, that our choice matters, and our God is always ready to answer.